It was a gloomy autumn evening when my friends and I decided to go camping in the deep woods. We were adrenaline junkies, always seeking new and terrifying experiences. This time, we got more than we bargained for. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire, the flames casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. The forest was alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant hoots of owls. We told ghost stories, trying to outdo each other in fear factor. That's when we heard it, a low, guttural growl, like no animal we'd ever heard before. It sent shivers down our spines. We grabbed our flashlights and scanned the darkness, but saw nothing unusual. We brushed it off as our overactive imaginations and continued with our campfire tales. As the night wore on, we heard the growling again, closer this time. Panic began to set in. We huddled together, scanning the trees with our flashlights. That's when we saw it. Emerging from the shadows was a grotesque figure, a twisted hybrid of a man and a dog. Its body was covered in matted, filthy fur, and its limbs were unnaturally elongated. Its face was a horrifying blend of human and canine features, with yellow, malevolent eyes that seemed to pierce into our souls. Frozen in terror, we watched as this abomination crept toward us, its growls growing louder and more menacing. It moved with an unnatural grace, like a predator stalking its prey. We could barely breathe, let alone scream. One of my friends, in a futile attempt to defend us, grabbed a stick and threw it at the creature. The stick struck its head, and for a moment, it paused. Its eyes locked onto the one who had thrown the stick, and then it let out a blood-curdling howl. The creature lunged at us, and chaos erupted. We ran in every direction, but it was fast, much faster than any human could be. One by one, my friends disappeared into the darkness, their terrified screams echoing through the woods. I managed to find a hiding spot, trembling and trying to make as little noise as possible. The creature's footsteps grew faint, and I prayed it would leave. Hours passed, and the forest fell silent. The next morning, I cautiously emerged from my hiding place, alone and shaken. There was no sign of my friends, only the remnants of our campfire. I stumbled out of the woods, my mind haunted by the twisted Dogman's nightmarish image. To this day, no one believes my story, and I'm haunted by the memory of that night. Whether it was a monster or my imagination run wild, I'll never know. But one thing is for sure, I'll never go camping in those woods again. Once upon a chilling night in a quiet, remote cabin deep within the woods, the Montgomery family huddled together. The wind howled outside, and the forest's ancient trees seemed to whisper eerie secrets. Little did they know that this night would become a nightmarish tale they'd never forget. The Montgomerys had chosen this cabin for its isolation, seeking refuge from the chaos of the city. They were a family of four, Mark and Sarah, devoted parents, and their two young children, Emily and Jacob. It was meant to be a peaceful weekend getaway, but fate had other plans. Around midnight, the family was jolted awake by the sound of frantic scratching at the front door. Mark grabbed his flashlight and cautiously approached, his heart pounding in his chest. As he opened the door a crack, a foul odor filled the air, and he could see nothing but darkness beyond. With a sense of foreboding, Mark stepped outside, scanning the area with his flashlight. There, lurking in the shadows, was a grotesque figure, a towering creature with the body of a man, but the head of a monstrous dog. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly malevolence. Mark stumbled back, slamming the door shut, his hands trembling. He whispered to his family, urging them to stay silent. But the creature outside seemed to sense their presence. It began to scratch and scrape at the door with ferocious determination, its claws leaving deep gouges in the wood. As the minutes stretched into hours, the Montgomerys were trapped in their own home, paralyzed with fear. The creature's scratching intensified, and its growls became more menacing. Sarah held her children close, tears streaming down her face. The creature's efforts eventually subsided, but the family dared not move or make a sound. They remained huddled together in terrified silence until the first light of dawn crept through the windows. Only then did they dare to breathe a sigh of relief. When they finally ventured outside, they found deep, clawed marks on the door, and the stench of the creature still lingered in the air. The Montgomerys wasted no time packing their belongings and leaving the cabin behind, never to return. To this day, the family cannot explain the horrifying encounter they had that night. They moved back to the city, haunted by the memory of the Dogman's invasion of their home, a nightmarish event that forever changed their lives, leaving them with a chilling reminder of the terrors that can lurk in the darkness of the wilderness. It was a night like no other when I found myself alone on the night shift at the abandoned Ravenwood Asylum, a place whispered about in hushed tones for its dark history. The storm outside raged on, with torrential rain and thunder that echoed through the old, decaying hallways. To make matters worse, the power had gone out, plunging the asylum into an inky abyss. My flashlight was my only source of comfort as I made my rounds, my steps echoing eerily off the cracked tiles. The occasional creak of the building seemed to be the only company I had. The patients who once inhabited these cells had been gone for decades, but the echoes of their suffering seemed to linger. As I reached the end of a long corridor, I heard a distant, haunting howl. My blood ran cold. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard before, a combination of human agony and feral rage. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The flickering emergency lights added to the eerie atmosphere, casting long, ominous shadows that seemed to dance and writhe in the corners of my vision. I continued down the hallway, my heart pounding, convinced it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Then, from the darkness ahead, a pair of glowing yellow eyes emerged. They were fixed on me, unblinking and malevolent. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The eyes were at a height that no human could achieve, and as I shone my flashlight upon them, the horror that unfolded before me left me trembling in terror. Standing before me was a creature that defied all reason, a monstrous abomination, a dogman. Its matted fur clung to its twisted, emaciated body, and its long, bony fingers ended in razor-sharp claws. Saliva dripped from its grotesque, snarling maw, revealing rows of jagged teeth. I stumbled backward, my flashlight shaking uncontrollably. The creature let out a guttural growl that seemed to shake the very walls of the asylum. Panic coursed through my veins as I turned to run, but the corridors twisted and shifted, like a never-ending maze. The asylum itself seemed to conspire against me. Desperation drove me onward, and I finally burst through a door into a long-forgotten, overgrown courtyard. The rain fell in torrents, soaking me to the bone, but there was no escape. The dogman was relentless, its eerie yellow eyes still tracking me. With no other options, I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was a lifeline in the darkness. They sent help, and as the sirens drew near, the dogman retreated into the shadows. The authorities scoured the asylum, but there was no sign of the creature. To this day, I'm haunted by that nightmarish encounter, wondering if it was a malevolent spirit or something even more sinister. The Ravenwood Asylum remains abandoned, its dark secrets hidden in the shadows, a place forever etched in my nightmares. It was a quiet, moonless night in the small town of Pine Crest, nestled deep in the woods. Officer Robert Mitchell and his partner, Officer Lisa Patterson, were patrolling the isolated backroads, ensuring the safety of the few residents who called this remote area home. As they drove through the winding forested roads, the radio crackled to life with a static-filled voice. Unit 7, come in. We've got a report of a strange sighting near Miller's Grove. Caller says they've seen some sort of creature lurking in the woods. Might be a wild animal. Robert glanced at Lisa, both sharing a knowing look that something about this call felt off. Nevertheless, they responded, "Copy that. Dispatch. We're en route to Miller's Grove." The drive to Miller's Grove took them deeper into the dense forest, the tall trees looming overhead like ancient sentinels. When they arrived, they found a trembling man named Tom Wilson standing beside his pickup truck. His face was pale, and he was pointing a shaky finger into the woods. "You won't believe what I saw," Tom stammered as he greeted the officers. Robert and Lisa exchanged another glance, and then Robert asked, "What did you see, Mr. Wilson?" Tom took a deep breath and recounted a terrifying tale. He had been parked at the edge of the grove, trying to enjoy the serene night, when he heard rustling in the underbrush. Assuming it was a deer or some other wildlife, he reached for his flashlight. But what emerged from the darkness was no ordinary animal. Tom described a towering figure with the body of a man and the head of a monstrous dog. Its eyes glowed with an unholy fire, and it moved with an unnatural grace. The creature had fixed its gaze upon him, causing Tom to freeze in terror. He believed he was about to meet a gruesome end when the creature suddenly turned and vanished back into the woods. Skeptical yet concerned, Robert and Lisa decided to investigate. They followed Tom's shaky directions, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. As they ventured deeper into the woods, a sense of unease settled upon them. Suddenly, a low growl pierced the silence, and the air grew colder. Lisa's flashlight caught a glimpse of movement among the trees. The two officers raised their weapons, their hearts pounding, and there it was, a nightmarish creature lurking in the shadows. The Dogman was unlike anything they had ever seen, towering on two legs covered in matted fur, with sharp claws and those piercing, malevolent eyes. It let out a bone-chilling howl, sending shivers down their spines. Robert and Lisa quickly radioed for backup, but when they looked back at the spot where the creature had stood, it had vanished into thin air, leaving only the echoes of its haunting howl. Backup arrived, and a thorough search of the area yielded no sign of the creature. Tom's story was corroborated by the officers, but there was no concrete evidence to explain the terrifying encounter. As they drove back to the station, Robert and Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that they had encountered something truly unnatural that night, something that defied explanation and left them with a chilling reminder of the terrors that could lurk in the depths of the woods. The legend of the Dogman in Pine Crest would forever haunt their thoughts and dreams. In the heart of the dense Appalachian forests, a group of seasoned hunters embarked on a treacherous expedition. Unbeknownst to them, their pursuit of game would soon turn into a chilling battle for survival. The hunters, led by the experienced tracker and guide Daniel, had ventured deeper into the woods than ever before. Their prey this time was a massive buck, rumored to be the largest in the region. They set up camp in a clearing near an old, abandoned farmland, its eerie presence foreshadowing the horrors that would soon unfold. As night fell, their campfire crackled and cast eerie shadows on the towering trees. The forest was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, but something else lurked in the darkness, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down their spines. The men exchanged uneasy glances, but they attributed it to the wind rustling the leaves. Hours passed, and the hunters were awakened by an ungodly cacophony of growls and snarls. Emerging from the woods were not one, but multiple dogmen, their grotesque forms illuminated by the moonlight. They moved with an uncanny coordination, closing in on the hunters' campsite. Panic gripped the group as they grabbed their rifles and formed a defensive circle. The Dogmen, relentless and horrifying, encircled the hunters, their eyes glowing with malevolence. It became clear that they were the ones being hunted now. The first shots were fired, but the creatures seemed impervious to the bullets, shrugging off wounds that would have incapacitated any normal animal. The Dogmen retaliated, closing the gap with astonishing speed and agility, forcing the hunters to retreat further into the abandoned farmland. The decrepit buildings loomed ahead, offering a potential refuge. With fear driving them forward, the hunters scrambled inside. Their heartbeats echoed in the eerie silence of the farm. Broken down tractors, rusted tools, and decaying hay bales served as their grim surroundings. As the Dogmen closed in, the hunters barricaded themselves in the old farmhouse. The creatures relentlessly battered the doors and windows, their growls and howls reverberating through the night. With each attack, the wooden barricades weakened, and the hunters knew they couldn't hold out for long. With dawn approaching, the hunters faced a grim choice: make their final stand or attempt a desperate escape. They opted for the former. Armed to the teeth, they burst from the farmhouse, determined to face their relentless pursuers head-on. A fierce battle ensued, bullets and claws clashing in a desperate struggle for survival. Blood was spilled on the abandoned farmland, and the hunters fought with a tenacity born of sheer terror. One by one, the Dogmen fell, their grotesque forms finally succumbing to the relentless gunfire. In the end, the hunters emerged battered and traumatized but victorious. The sun rose over the now silent farmland, casting an eerie light on the aftermath of their terrifying ordeal. The legend of that night would forever haunt their dreams, a reminder that in the heart of darkness, there are horrors beyond imagination. In the Appalachian woods, Thomas, an avid hiker, found himself racing through the dense forest, his heart pounding with fear. He had stumbled upon something unimaginable, a creature resembling a dogman, and terror propelled him to flee for his life. In his panicked sprint, he failed to notice the hidden traps scattered amidst the undergrowth. With a sudden, searing pain, he stepped into a bear trap, its jaws clamping down on his leg. Agonizing screams pierced the eerie silence of the woods as he writhed in excruciating pain. As he desperately tried to free himself, a gut-wrenching realization struck. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with unnerving speed towards him. It was the Dogman, its form a horrifying blend of canine and human features, eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. Thomas's heart raced with a primal fear, knowing escape was futile. He frantically reached for anything within reach, but the trap held him in its merciless grip. The Dogman closed in, its growls echoing like a death knell. In a last surge of adrenaline-fueled terror, Thomas fought against the trap, his mind racing with thoughts of impending doom. The creature's malevolent gaze bore into him as it advanced, a chilling reminder of the unknown horrors that lurked in the depths of the forest. As the creature drew closer, Thomas's screams faded into the darkness of the forest, his fate sealed in the clutches of the merciless Dogman. His chilling encounter would forever remain a haunting tale, a warning to those who dared to wander too deep into the wild, where ancient legends and unimaginable horrors lurk in the shadows. dense forest lay a network of illegal poachers, a ruthless group seeking profit at the expense of wildlife. Unbeknownst to them, the forest held secrets far more terrifying than they could ever imagine. One moonless night, the poachers set out on their nefarious mission. Armed with rifles and traps, they moved through the woods, their footsteps muffled by the underbrush. Unseen eyes watched their every move, a guardian of the forest, the Dogman. As the poachers laid their snares and aimed their weapons, an ominous atmosphere enveloped the forest. Strange markings adorned the trees, warning signs etched in a language they could not comprehend. Ignoring these warnings, they pressed on, driven by greed. Suddenly, a low growl reverberated through the trees, freezing the poachers in their tracks. A monstrous figure emerged from the shadows, the Dogman, a grotesque hybrid of man and beast. Its presence sent waves of terror through the poachers. Thinking quickly, they fired their rifles, hoping to scare off the creature, but the bullets seemed to have no effect. The Dogman, fueled by primal rage, retaliated with terrifying speed and agility. The poachers scattered, their desperate attempts to escape proving futile. The creature moved with a ferocity that defied logic, tearing through their ranks with brutal efficiency. Limbs flailed, screams echoed through the woods, and the night air was thick with the stench of blood and fear. Cornered and outnumbered, the poachers made a final stand. But the Dogman was relentless, its yellow eyes glowing in the darkness as it closed in for the kill. Their weapons were useless against its savage strength. In a desperate bid for survival, a few poachers managed to flee, leaving their comrades behind to face a fate too horrifying to comprehend. The forest fell silent, and only the agonized cries of the wounded echoed through the night. When dawn broke, authorities were alerted to the grisly scene, a massacre in the heart of the woods. But there were no survivors among the poachers, only torn remnants of their camp and the haunting legend of the Dogman, a vengeful guardian protecting the sanctity of the forest. The encounter would forever serve as a chilling warning against those who dared to disrupt nature's balance for their own gain. In a town nestled amidst dense forests, Officer Liam received a series of distressing calls from a frantic woman, Mary, reporting sightings of a mysterious figure lurking near her property. Each call painted a chilling picture, a shadowy figure darting between trees, lurking in the fields, and watching her from the darkness. Concerned for Mary's safety, Liam decided to investigate the unsettling reports. As he drove towards her secluded farmhouse, a sense of unease settled in. The surroundings were shrouded in an eerie stillness, amplified by Emily's trembling voice over the phone. Upon arriving at the farmhouse, Mary greeted Liam with a trembling voice, recounting her unnerving experiences. She spoke of glimpses of a lurking figure, its form humanoid yet twisted, lurking at the edge of the woods and watching her every move. As the sun began to set, Liam and Mary kept watch, scanning the surrounding woods. The air grew thick with tension, the silence unsettling. Suddenly, a guttural growl echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down Liam's spine. In the fading light, Mary pointed towards the tree line, her voice trembling as she whispered, "There, behind the oak tree." Liam's heart raced as he focused his flashlight on the spot. Amber eyes glowed in the darkness, a humanoid figure, matted fur clinging to its grotesque form, staring back at them. It was the Dogman, its presence a chilling confirmation of Mary's haunting claims. Panic surged as the creature moved closer, its menacing growls filling the air. Liam radioed for backup, desperately trying to maintain composure in the face of the unimaginable. Mary cowered behind him, fear palpable in her trembling form. The Dogman circled, its predatory gaze fixed on the two of them. Liam raised his weapon, but the creature vanished into the shadows with unearthly speed, evading capture and leaving a lingering sense of dread. As reinforcements arrived, Liam relayed the harrowing encounter, but the creature had vanished without a trace. The night air remained thick with uncertainty, and the disturbing reality of the Dogman's existence weighed heavily on Liam's mind. The calls from Mary continued, each one more frantic than the last, as the haunting figure persisted in its eerie presence around her property. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that they had encountered something beyond comprehension. A malevolent force lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. I was part of a joint team, search and rescue personnel and seasoned hunters, tasked with tracking down the elusive Dogman that had claimed the life of a young child weeks earlier. The gravity of our mission weighed heavily on each of us, as we delved deep into the heart of the unforgiving woods. We set out at the break of dawn, determined to put an end to the terror that had gripped our community. The forest loomed ominously around us, a maze of dense trees and tangled underbrush. The air was thick with an eerie silence, a foreboding stillness that made my skin crawl. As we traversed the rugged terrain, our group maintained a vigilant watch, our senses on high alert. The haunting memories of the tragedy spurred us forward, despite the chilling uncertainty of what lay ahead. Hours passed in tense anticipation, until a bone-chilling howl pierced the quietude, a sound that sent shivers down our spines. The signal we had been waiting for, the Dogman, was near. Adrenaline surged as we prepared for the confrontation, each member of our group armed and ready. We followed cryptic clues and whispers from locals, navigating deeper into the labyrinth of trees and shadows. Then, amidst the looming canopy, it emerged, the Dogman, a grotesque figure with a humanoid form and the aura of an ancient terror. Its eyes glowed with an unholy intensity as it fixed its gaze upon us. Panic mingled with determination as we braced ourselves for the encounter. The creature moved with unearthly speed, evading our attempts to corner it. It was like chasing a ghost, a chilling primal force that defied our every tactic. Amidst the chaos, our group split, navigating the dense woods in pursuit of the elusive creature. Tension and fear hung heavy in the air, the adrenaline-fueled pursuit turning the forest into a battleground of survival. But as the day wore on, exhaustion took its toll. The Dogman remained elusive, slipping through our grasp like a phantom in the shadows. Frustration and desperation gnawed at our resolve, our efforts yielding no tangible success. As nightfall descended, we regrouped, our spirits battered by the relentless chase. The forest seemed to hold its breath, an eerie quiet settling over the landscape. The haunting cries of the child's tragedy echoed in my mind, a grim reminder of our failure to bring closure to the grieving family. Our search for the Dogman continued, but as we retreated from the woods that night, the weight of our unfinished mission lingered, a chilling testament to the unyielding mystery and terror of the Dogman that prowled the darkness. northern Michigan, 5 seasoned hunters set out on a weekend hunting trip, seeking the thrill of the chase and the solitude of the wilderness. Their names were Mike, Jake, Brian, Andy, and Kyle, each with years of hunting experience under their belts. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the scent of pine and damp earth filled the air. The first day of the hunt was uneventful, but on the second day, they stumbled upon peculiar markings on the trees, deep gouges that seemed to be claw marks. Unease settled in, but they dismissed it as the work of a bear. On the third day, they found strange tracks in the muddy ground, tracks that resembled a wolf, but were unnaturally large and had a human-like quality to them. Anxiety crept in, but their desire for adventure pushed them to continue. On the final night of their hunting trip, they set up camp in a small clearing. The fire crackled, and they exchanged stories, trying to keep their minds off the eerie discoveries of the past days. The forest seemed to close in on them as darkness fell, the trees casting long, ominous shadows. Suddenly, they heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. Their flashlights pierced the darkness, revealing a set of glowing, yellow eyes. The creature emerged from the shadows, its form a grotesque blend of man and dog, with matted fur and sharp claws. The air turned cold, and fear gripped their hearts. Without warning, the creature lunged at them, teeth bared and claws slashing. Panic ensued as the hunters fought back, firing their rifles into the night. The creature howled in pain, retreating momentarily. But it returned, relentless and furious. The hunters knew they were facing something beyond their understanding. Their shots seemed to have little effect on the creature, and it was closing in. In a final act of desperation, they doused the fire with water from their canteens, plunging them into darkness. In the pitch black, they split up, each taking a defensive position. The creature circled them, its growls echoing through the forest. Mike, Andy, and Kyle fired at it, aiming for its eyes, but it dodged with a supernatural agility. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the creature let out a deafening, anguished howl, and the forest fell silent. The hunters cautiously lit a flare, revealing the creature's lifeless body a few feet away. A fatal shot had finally found its mark. Shaken and battered, they quickly packed their belongings and left the woods, haunted by the nightmarish encounter. They would forever carry the scars of that night, and the legend of the Dogman would forever be etched in their minds, a chilling reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the depths of the forest. Dr. Evelyn Marshall, a dedicated nature mythologist, had spent 6 months meticulously studying a bear she named Artemis in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. Armed with her expertise and a desire to understand the creature's behavior, she had placed a specialized GPS tracker on Artemis to monitor her movements, eating habits, and overall health. One ominous morning, Evelyn received a notification that the tracker had gone offline. Puzzled and concerned, she headed into the woods to investigate. As she ventured deeper, the tranquility of the forest seemed to have been replaced by an unsettling stillness. Evelyn arrived at the last known location of the tracker, finding signs of a struggle and bloodied paw prints leading further into the forest. Fear crept into her heart, but her determination to uncover the truth urged her forward. Guided by the blood trail, she eventually stumbled upon a horrifying sight. Artemis lay motionless, her once magnificent form now torn and ravaged. Shock and sorrow overwhelmed Evelyn as she examined the brutal scene. A low growl broke the silence, and she turned to witness a monstrous creature, the Dogman, tearing into Artemis's remains. Its matted fur clung to its twisted, skeletal frame, and its eyes glowed with an unholy fire. The sight sent shivers down her spine, and she realized she was facing a creature of legend. Paralyzed by terror, Evelyn knew she had to escape. As she backed away slowly, branches snapping under her trembling feet, the dogman's head snapped up, its malevolent gaze locking onto her. Time seemed to slow as Evelyn turned and sprinted, her heartbeat drowning out the cacophony of the forest. The creature pursued, its growls growing louder, echoing through the woods. Evelyn desperately sought refuge, her mind racing. She remembered an old abandoned cabin nearby, and with a surge of hope, she veered towards it. Breathless and on the verge of despair, Evelyn reached the cabin, slamming the door shut and barricading it with anything she could find. She had narrowly escaped the clutches of the dogman. The creature's snarls and growls filled the air outside, but it eventually retreated into the darkness. Hours later, when the forest fell silent, Evelyn cautiously emerged from the cabin and made her way back to her vehicle, leaving behind the legend that had come to life. Haunted by the traumatic encounter, Evelyn vowed to share her story, hoping to warn others of the dangers that lurk in the wild. The legend of the Dogman and the brutal fate of Artemis would forever be etched in her memory, a chilling reminder that sometimes myths and reality intertwine in the most horrifying ways. In the Appalachian wilderness, a small search and rescue team embarked on a daunting mission to find a man named David, who had gone missing 2 weeks ago. The forest was vast and unforgiving, and hope was dwindling that they would find him alive. Led by Sergeant Alex Turner, the team trudged through the dense woods, battling the elements and their own growing sense of dread. They followed leads and clues, often coming across unsettling signs, torn clothing, broken branches, and peculiar claw marks etched into trees. As night fell, the team gathered around a campfire, discussing their plan for the next day. The forest seemed to come alive with eerie sounds, adding to the tension that hung in the air. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The next morning, they pushed deeper into the woods, determined to cover as much ground as possible. They discovered a secluded valley where they found the remnants of an old poachers' camp. Rusted traps, worn-out boots, and bullet casings were scattered around. Intrigued and hopeful for a lead, they searched the area meticulously. Suddenly, a team member named Sarah called out, pointing towards a treehouse hidden amidst the thick branches. It was a makeshift structure, perched high above the ground. With caution, they climbed up to investigate, hoping to find some clue that would lead them to David. However, as they entered the treehouse, a rank odor filled the air, making their stomachs turn. Something felt dreadfully wrong. Moments later, they heard a low growl, sending chills down their spines. Alex shone his flashlight outside, and there, standing on its hind legs, was a horrifying creature, a dogman, its eyes glinting with malevolent intelligence. Panic surged through the team as they retreated into the treehouse, the dogman circling below, its growls growing louder and more menacing. They realized they were trapped, with no way to escape. Hours passed, the forest becoming an eerie, quiet wasteland. Sarah peered cautiously out of a small window, confirming that the dogman was gone. Taking this chance, they slowly climbed down from the treehouse, praying they had escaped its clutches. Shaken but alive, they made their way back to their base camp, vowing never to return to that cursed forest. David was never found, and the dogman's chilling image haunted their dreams. The legend of that encounter would forever live on in their memories, a terrifying reminder of the horrors that lurked in the wilderness. In the Pacific Northwest, 3 friends, Jack, Emily, and Luke, decided to embark on a camping trip to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life. They found a secluded area in the forest, far away from civilization, where they could set up camp and unwind. The first day was filled with laughter as they pitched their tents and explored the lush surroundings. As evening approached, they gathered around the campfire, the crackling flames dancing and casting eerie shadows on the trees. On the second day, they discovered strange markings on the trees surrounding their campsite. Deep, claw-like gouges and cryptic symbols etched into the bark sent shivers down their spines. Uneasiness settled in, but they chose to believe it was the work of some wild animal. On the third day, a sense of being watched gnawed at them. Every so often, they noticed something darting past the trees, something dark and fleeting. Each time they tried to focus on it, it would vanish, leaving them in a state of apprehension. As night fell, their anxiety grew. The woods seemed to come alive with strange noises and rustling leaves. Suddenly, a chilling silence engulfed the forest, causing the friends to exchange nervous glances. Their campfire crackled dimly, barely illuminating the darkness. And then they heard it, a low growl, unlike any animal they had ever encountered. Fear tightened its grip on them as they realized they were not alone. Something was out there. Hesitantly, they crept towards the trees, shining their flashlights into the shadows. Emerging from behind a tree was a horrifying creature, a dogman. Its body was a grotesque fusion of human and canine features, its yellow eyes glowing with malevolence. Paralyzed with fear, they stood frozen as the dogman approached. It was a twisted, nightmarish figure, covered in matted fur. The creature's growls filled the air, echoing like a death knell. In a desperate attempt to escape, they turned and ran. Panic surged through them as they sprinted through the forest, the dogman in relentless pursuit. The creature's howls were terrifying, and they could feel its hot breath on their necks. Just when they thought all hope was lost, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. Without a second thought, they barricaded themselves inside, praying for safety. The dogman's snarls grew louder, but the cabin held firm. Hours later, when the forest fell silent, they ventured out, the first light of dawn illuminating the sky. The dogman was gone, but the trauma of that night would forever be etched in their minds. They vowed never to return to those woods, haunted by the encounter with the dogman, a monstrous creature that defied all explanation.